Have you ever felt like something within you suddenly took over? A sudden mood shift, an overreaction to someone's comment, or a situation when it felt like you sabotaged yourself. This likely was a wounded part of yourself, unexpectedly stepping in to take control from your unconscious. A part of you that learned long ago how to protect you in order to survive, to belong, and to be loved. Operating out of your sight, it may now have become your inner saboteur. As children, we do everything we can to meet our most basic needs of safety, love, and belonging. We are fully dependent on others to provide us with these. In this pursuit, we learn to shape ourselves. We craft a personality with only the parts that win other people's approval. The other parts that resulted in rejection or criticism, we hide away. And so, without realizing it, we exile parts of ourselves. These exiled parts of ourselves become part of what Jung calls the shadow. He once said, "The shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself. It holds the qualities we disown, repress, or deny. Anything that once felt unsafe to express." When caregivers like parents or teachers are harsh, absent, or emotionally unavailable, a child has no choice but to adapt. To maintain the vital bond with those they depend on, the child begins to conform, shaping themselves into a role that pleases the caregiver. In doing so, they start to suppress their own needs, emotions, and natural impulses. But when powerful emotions like anger, shame, fear, or abandonment aren't processed, they don't disappear. They sink into the unconscious. There, some of these unresolved emotional experiences begin to cluster into what Jung calls complexes, autonomous parts of the psyche with their own agendas. A complex, according to Jung, is a little personality that can seize control of consciousness. A complex can be really overpowering and put you in a state of total inferiority. You cannot think straight anymore. You are possessed. Complexes have us, even when we don't want them to. They come in like an unwelcome guest, and they can be quite mischievous. As Jung says, complexes seem to delight in playing impish tricks. They slip just the wrong word into one's mouth and make one forget the name of the person one is about to introduce. Yet, they are there for a reason. Complexes are clusters of emotionally charged associations, thoughts, and behaviors centered around a core experience. They activate when something from the present echoes the original pain or experience that created it in the first place. They are trying to protect a younger version of you. Complexes don't just influence how we feel, they influence how we act. They override our adult self to protect a much younger one. one that still fears rejection, shame, or abandonment. This is how the shadow becomes our saboteur. For example, I personally carry a perfectionist complex. As a child, I was often praised when I performed well, when I got good grades at school, or when I met other people's expectations of me. But when I didn't, I was criticized, sometimes even shamed. So I learned as a child that I must do things perfectly. I must meet other people's expectations if I am to be worthy of love, acceptance, and approval. Now, if I struggle to fix something or I feel I'm not able to do something perfectly, I get seized by fear. My thoughts begin to spiral, doubt creeps in. It's as if my old critical French teacher might walk through the door at any moment. At that moment, it is hard to keep doing what you're doing. You want to run away, flee, distract yourself from feeling the feeling and the fears attached to that. And in my case, that is the feeling of being imperfect and the fear of failure. This is a complex in action. It remembers pain I no longer need protection from. I am an adult now. I can look after myself. But the complex doesn't know that yet. There's something unresolved there. The perfectionist complex is only one example of a complex. We could have many more. Another very common complex is the abandonment complex. This is a complex that is formed in early childhood when caregivers were inconsistent, unavailable, unreliable, or emotionally absent. This complex may believe it's unworthy of love or that love is unreliable and cannot be trusted. And so, when someone gets too close, when love feels too good to be true, it pushes them away. It sabotages the very connection we long for. Why? Because it's trying to protect us from feeling abandoned again. As Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. If left in the dark, our complexes continue to corrupt our decisions, beliefs, and relationships. If we have a strong complex that we are not aware of, we may, for example, believe we are never good enough, and it may keep us from trying anything new. Or we might forever chase perfection in a world that's imperfect, or avoid intimacy and love, or stay small and unnoticeable, not necessarily because that's who we want to be, but because that's what our complexes believe is safe. And it used to be, but for us adults, they are a major limitation in living a life in which we can go beyond and reach for the skies. If we want to be less impacted and controlled by our complexes, we have to reconcile them into our consciousness. Our instant reaction when we feel certain feelings is to turn away from them, to distract ourselves from feeling them. But if we want to be more in control of our reactions in certain situations, we have to welcome the complex in. Shadow work is the path of integrating parts of our unconscious back into our consciousness. It's the act of turning toward what we once rejected and welcoming it home. Our complexes have a story to tell us. As Jung says, we must never forget that in any complex there is a conflict. It is a fragmentary personality, and these fragmentary personalities form themselves around certain emotional experiences. Complexes shed light on an emotional experience from the past that was unprocessed. Something there feels unseen, repressed, and avoided, and they will continue to be so as long as they are treated that similar way. This work begins with awareness. Starting to notice when you are possessed allows for further exploration. When you start to notice when you are triggered, you can start to interact with this part of yourself. This means to pause and listen and try to see what the complex is trying to tell you. And it's not easy. It is very hard to sit with the parts of you that were once shamed. But this is exactly what this part of you longs for, to be finally allowed, to be seen, to be reintegrated into your sense of self. As Jung says, we do not get rid of a complex by repressing it, but only by recognizing and assimilating it. One of the most impactful shadow work practices to engage with the wounded parts of yourself is to start a dialogue with them. Though it is uncomfortable at first, starting a dialogue with this part of yourself is a major step towards healing. Often you will find there is a younger version of yourself or inner child in a complex. Through conversation with this younger self, you can make space for their needs, acknowledge their pain, and discover what this part of you needed and what it needs of you now. With the conversation going, you're inviting this part of yourself back to your castle. You're giving it a space, a room to stay. No longer does it have to stray at the edge of your kingdom, sabotaging you on the road to get your attention. With the invitation, you can now start to build a relationship with this part of yourself, and in return, receive its hidden gifts. Like the poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love." Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to share something about a complex that's very present for you in your life, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I will see you next time.